Welcome to another episode of the Planning Perspectives podcast. I'm one of your hosts today, Kate Duffy, here with Jamie Hopkins. Jamie, good to be here with you.
Thanks, Kate. Great to be here with you again, too.
Yeah. So today we are tackling one of the most common questions we get. How much money do I need for retirement? But that's really only half of the conversation because we really have to think about the lives that we want to live in retirement. So, Jamie, I'm going to put you on the spot to start. When people ask you, how much do I need for retirement? How do you answer that question?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's the same lawyer response that all lawyers give to everything is it depends. And it is. That's what I usually start with is I flip it back usually with another question. And when somebody's like, well, how much do we really need? It's what do you want to do?
Right.
And you need to dive into that before you can come up with any number. Now, that being said, we'll spend some time on this. People do gravitate to a number. The reality is, when somebody's asking that question, they already have something in their mind. Like if you're listening to the show right now, what number's in your mind? When you say, like, how much money do you need to retire? You have a number that is sitting in your mind right now, maybe up or down, but you're like, I kind of need this much. And maybe that's in today's dollars and not in future dollars, but you have something in your mind. And I think part of that is we were just talking about lists. And when you make things more concrete, you feel like you have more control over
Right.
them. The anxiety drops. To have an unknown, like, how much do I need for retirement? I have no idea. That's anxiety inducing. So by putting something concrete there, I do think it helps. So
Right.
while I want to start with, like, what do you want to do? You do want to kind of get to a number that then generates your income.
hmm Because numbers feel very specific. You give me a number and we can back into it and say, okay, you need to save this much. It's black and white. It is easy. The other stuff is a little bit more difficult because it requires some life experiments, some introspection, and finding out all of the things that you like and don't like to do in your life.
Yeah. And, for retirement, it's even harder because it's a time period for some people 30, 40 years
Right.
away. You don't know what the world's going to look like. You might not even know what your family situation is going to look like. So to figure out how much money you need at that point is very challenging when you're in your 30s. You might not have kids yet. You might not have bought a house. And
Yeah.
I'm supposed to think about myself at 65. Do I have 0 grandkids or 12 grandkids? Well, life probably looks incredibly different in those two scenarios on how I'm going to spend my time and the money. So you really want to get saving early and, like, just build those
Mhm.
habits, put money aside. And as you kind of move through life, you can fine tune, like, who I am, those aspirations. Like, do you want to be an adventurer or an explorer, or you want to be a philanthropist? And all of a sudden that starts changing how you
Right.
both spend your time and your money.
Yeah, because we can go again back to the number. And I think today's number is 1.4 million, thereabouts. Like, this is what Americans need to retire. And that could work beautifully for one couple, one
Yeah.
family, and it could absolutely positively fail for another.
Yeah, and that 1.4 million is a really interesting one. Just came out from a survey, and that's what the average American now feels they need saved to have a secure retirement. The reality is that number is probably too high for most people. They probably don't need that much if things like Social Security remain funded and Medicare and the support structures that we pay into today from earned benefits. Although we're gearing towards that. If you run the 4%, kind of retirement finding around this, and what that really says is 50-50 stock bond portfolio
Mhm.
for 30 years, you can spend about 4% of that portfolio adjusted for inflation each year and not run out of money. So at a 1.4 million or 1.5, that's about right. You're talking about what, $50,000 a year that you could spend historically and not run out of money. Then you add on Social Security, other things like that. So you might be talking about a couple that's generating nearly $100,000 a year. That's probably more than most people need in retirement. But then you get to other couples and they want to spend 200,
Mhm.
300, $400,000 a year. A $1.4 million savings portfolio is not going to get you there. So it
Right.
does get back to how much do you want to spend? How long are you going to be in retirement
Mhm.
is a big one too, because that math is all based on 30-year retirements. Well, that's 65 to 95. But if you work to 72, maybe it's not 30 years, but it could be 72 to 102.
Right.
And that starts to change a bit.
Right. And that is a lot of life. Like when you think about retirement, we don't do something for 30 or 40 years and then turn a
Yeah.
switch and then say, okay, I'm going to be a world traveler or I'm going to be a gardener or whatever it is. Like you have to have some purpose to that number to know how it's and if it's going to work for you. And so the conversation again goes back to, I think, a little bit of identity. Like, who are you now? Who are you aspiring to be? And then how do you sort of implement that in your life now to a degree? One question I think about is for myself and for others, like if you took a look at your calendar for the last 30 days, is there anything in there that reflects a little bit of the life that you want in the future?
Are you asking me specifically?
I
You
am going to kick
can.
it over to
Yeah.
you. Do you
Well,
have that?
in the last 30 days, we're probably very tight now on the 30 days, but yes, my kids' stuff is in there a lot. So that does
Right.
show up on the calendar, sports, and
Hmm.
we were just on a swim meet with all three of my kids 2 days ago. And I love being part of that. So yeah, I think that part, I do a lot of nonprofit give back. That's pretty much every day on there. So those elements, yes. There's other things that probably don't show up on my calendar that I would like to see in the future, but that's a balance today. So
Hmm.
I don't think all of it is there, but some of it. How about you? Do you have some of that in the last 30 days?
I do. So,
You're like
last
you're going through a move and a house and all these things, so you're really gonna.
it's been a little hectic, but
Yeah.
if I do think about that, like what is the time that I carve out for myself for the things that I like to do? I love ballroom dancing. We've talked about that
Yes.
before. And there are ebbs and flows to life. There was a period of time not too long ago where I was doing that maybe 4 days a week. It's
Okay.
not quite that today,
Yeah.
but there are glimpses of things that I want to do. I love to read, I love to learn, like I like to ballroom dance. So it is sort of layering in those things now because we talk about practicing retirement. We talk about sort of implementing those things along the way so we're better at retirement.
Yeah. Well, so like next week, everybody's going to tune in to Kate Duffy's podcast on house flipping on the main line, right? They're big shows. They're very popular nowadays, and you can show how you're tearing down this wall, putting in a
I don't
beam.
know if you'd want a camera in the house right now.
You get the before and after. That's what that
It's
big
very true.
reveal at the end is
Yep.
always very
Yep.
exciting. The magic of editing is
Yes.
fun. Yeah.
It'll take us some time to get
That's
there.
that's good though. Yeah, I think one of the things that I always talked about is if you're talking to somebody and you're trying to figure out what they want to do, and I use the adventure one a lot just because I think it sounds cool, but you want to be a world traveler or something like that, you probably can't do all of that today while you're working and you have all these responsibilities.
Right.
But what are the small steps that you can take towards that? So it might not be that you can travel the world for a whole year, but can you take 5 days and do whatever trip it is that kind of takes you towards that? Uh, Go climb a mountain, go motorcycle across the country, whatever that next step is. And it's not a full life of it, but it's elements of it, I think is really important. You also see it in the philanthropy side, which is a big part of retirement satisfaction.
Yeah.
If you look at people who aren't giving back and volunteering, they're not nearly as satisfied and happy in retirement as those that have some type of give back initiative. But you do get a lot of individuals that are nearing retirement, getting ready to retire that say, "Oh, I really want to get involved," but they haven't been involved with
Right.
anything. And it's really hard then to find that passion, whether you're giving money or volunteering. Start that ahead of time and figure out, like, do I actually like this organization? You do see people that start volunteering and then realize that the organization they thought they really wanted to give back to, they don't like how it's structured. They don't like how they spend money. They don't like the organization or the board or the way they're making decisions. And then they kind of give up.
Hmm.
And so get involved early. You don't have to give a lot of money, but volunteer if it's a weekend here or there. And then you can really lean into that part once you retire and you have more time available. But you found something that you can dive into.
Right.
And I think that's one that you can do 15, 20 years ahead of time to start figuring out what are the philanthropic and give back opportunities that you really care about.
Yeah, because there are a lot of people. Well, one of the characteristics of a successful retiree is having that sense of
Yeah.
purpose. Like you have the sense of purpose, you have enough, however you defined that for your
Yeah.
family. You have your community, your relationships, your health. Like there are these characteristics that, again, we don't just have them
Yeah.
tomorrow. And so it's like all the baby steps that we talk about from savings, like it is this life implementation too, that you have to start small.
Yeah. So I want to go back and reset on the retirement number. So one of the things is the actual number doesn't really matter. It's what income you can generate from it, and it depends on your situation. And I often say that, and people think, then I shouldn't have a number. That's actually not the point of it. The point is, you should have a savings goal for yourself
Right.
that then generates the income for the life you want to live. But there isn't one that everyone should have. So, like the notion of 1.4 million, that everybody's aiming at this number, that's not right.
Mhm.
It's too much for some, too little for others. You really have to have your own. Also, the reality is most Americans probably cannot save $1.4 million by the time they retire. So that number is unachievable for many. And for others, they can achieve that. So we do have to bring it back to reality a bit. The real conversation, though, which we've been talking about, is like that vision of your life. And I think we should go through this in phases. Is, when you're early working, I don't think the focus should be too hard on what
Right.
retirement in 30 years looks like. It's about building good habits, taking care of yourself, building your career, being involved with your community, your loved ones. That's the focus. As you start to near retirement, that's when this vision can start to kind of hit paper. You can put it into the computer.
Right.
You can start to build, what am I working towards? I think for some people that then becomes an inspiration to
Mhm.
do things. I've met people who are like, well, I really want to have this retirement home in a particular place. And then I talk about naming it. Like, don't just
Yes.
pick it. We've done this
Yep.
before on the show, but if you want to have that beach house in Avalon, somebody mentioned Avalon to me this
Yes.
morning. So, shore town here in New Jersey, like, name the beach house like the Maiden's
Right.
Voyage or something like that. I think there's like the Avalon
Mhm.
Maiden's Voyage, like a ship there, but like name the house, because then all of a sudden you've made it concrete, and
Yep.
all this activity, that you're working towards something real versus kind of an amorphous future thing
Mhm.
that doesn't have a lot of connection to you. So when you look in that like middle range, when you're like maybe 55, retirement's 10 years away, what do you talk to people
Mhm.
about?
So you're a little bit further through your career. Retirement feels like it's in your grasp at that point in time. So there is a visual. I have a lot of the conversations that we're talking about today, because when people focus on the money, it's like, but what does that actually mean for you? Does it mean spending more time with your family
Yeah.
and creating these memories? Like, does it mean finally being able to spend a little bit more time doing those things that you love, because it's really never about the dollars and cents. It's about what it means for you and what that conversation generally leads to. And I don't think people equate this immediately, but it's your value system. Like if you look at your calendar and your money, like it shows what you value in this life. And I help clients sort of center on that. And then from there, we can get to sort of the
Mm.
technical side and say, okay, let's put some illustrations out there and figure out what it looks like at these different dollar savings amounts. And that's generally how the conversation is started. Because if I start with the numbers, people are like, I don't know. That doesn't open up the conversation for people.
Yeah.
It's like the visual of like, what do I see my life being like? I see myself traveling to Europe. I see myself traveling here, traveling there. And one of the other interesting points is in these conversations, and when you're working with someone where you want to put a plan in place, we know that like nearly 8 out of 10 people, if they have a goal and they write it down and we have steps to reach that goal, and you're talking about it to someone, you have an accountability partner, you are so much more likely to reach that goal. So it doesn't have to be this amorphous thing out there. It can actually be the reality that you create for yourself and manifest into this world.
Yeah, an activity that I like to do, and I've done it with clients, I've done it with rooms full of hundreds of people, is the value activity where you put your top three down
Mhm.
and you write them down. And then you draw your coat of arms by turning those
Okay.
values into pictures.
Mhm.
So, do you know what your top three are, Kate?
Oh my gosh, my top 3
Yeah,
values?
real quick. You got to the ones that come up.
Okay, so I am definitely a relational person.
Okay.
So, meaningful relationships.
Okay.
I'm a lifelong learner, so learning is important.
Yeah.
And then like truth and integrity.
Okay. Truth and integrity.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna do this right here.
Mhm.
What's the picture that comes to mind for meaningful relationships?
Oh my gosh,
If you
there's
had
a
to
lot of people that pop into my
Right, but you
mind.
have to do a drawing. So what would it be? Turn it into a visual.
You want me to draw right now?
Yeah, well, you
It's
could
gonna be
just
a lot
tell
of stick
us. People
figures.
are
It would be
listening.
stick figures.
Stick
It would
figures.
be my partner,
Okay, like people holding
children,
hands.
yeah,
Yeah,
like a whole bunch of stick
whole bunch
people
of people.
together
Like
to
the
be
little
my
circle
family,
one where
my
they all hold
friends.
hands,
Yeah.
right? Like around the
Yeah.
world,
Mhm.
that one.
Yeah, I like that
That's
one.
a
I would
visual
do that
one.
one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So lifelong learning, is it just a book?
Lifelong learning would be probably stacks of books,
Stacks of
like
books. Okay, a
multiple
bunch of
books.
books. That's
Yep.
good. And truth and integrity, what would you do that one as?
Mm,
That's a tougher
that one's a
one.
tough
Yeah.
one.
So think about that one
I'm
for a
gonna have to think
second.
about that. Okay.
Yeah, see, I knew it. So mine were always family, community, and grit. Those were the
Yep.
three. And so family was a white hawk because my son's name in Gaelic means white hawk. So that like
Okay.
represented some aspect of the family.
Yep.
And the community was pineapple because that's a welcoming sign that used to
Okay.
be. They put it on like inns on the door when it was welcoming guests in.
Mhm.
So I thought that one was interesting. And then an anvil for grit. And that one's interesting because it's like this hard,
Yep.
purposeful thing that was built to withstand like all this
Mhm.
pounding and different stuff. And so that's the one that I would always draw.
Okay.
What was interesting about that though is like there's another follow-up question is like, do you want your like children to have all those same values as you? I think the first two,
Mhm.
yes. The grit one, I'm a big fan of grit, but maybe not in the same way that like I have it. Uh,
Right.
I might want a different version of it for
Mhm.
my children or my grandchildren, but I still think it's more of when I talk about my kids and my vision for them and the grandchildren, it's more of resilience, that ability to be resilient and independent versus having to rely on everyone else to do things for you. So it's been a little bit of a variation. But if you do like Grit, Angela
Mhm.
Duckworth's
Yep. She's
book,
great.
Grit, is phenomenal. One of my favorites. She's got lots of great TED Talks and speeches. So if you want to watch something really meaningful
Yep.
there, it's a great resource out there.
So what is the next part of that conversation that you have with clients after
Yeah.
you do that?
So the next part is well, actually, that is one of them. Like, do you want these values to move down to your
Mhm.
kids, your grandkids? And also, would people from the outside say that you live these?
Yep.
Would your kids say, or your spouse, your partner, your friends, that these are your top three too?
Mhm.
And I did this once where somebody on a podcast and the individual was like, "Oh, absolutely. My kids would say this." His wife was actually watching the show. We did it at his house and she was standing in the kitchen and burst out laughing and like on the show. And he's like, "What? You don't think so?" And she was like, "Kids wouldn't say any of those three." And then I was like, "Well, have that conversation with
That's a
them." And
good
he did.
yep.
And they said none of those three, any of his kids mentioned. So that was super interesting
Yep.
because internally he internalized these values, but his external world did not see those
Yep.
values. So then you can have those conversations and then think about, are you building the life that demonstrates those?
Right.
Are you living the life to your
Mhm.
values? And then you get back to the money part is like, then what do I need from a resource, a savings, and an income perspective to live these values in the way that I want to?
Yep.
And that's really then where's your savings when you're
Mhm.
60, 62? How much income can they generate? How are we investing? Do we need products and services that help us get more income? And just understand, right, how we're spending our money so we don't overspend and then become really fearful and underspend later in retirement. And I think that's an important part of like turning this vision now into a plan.
Right.
And so when you're having those conversations, right, we now have a vision, we
Yep.
kind of understand what we want to do, we are retiring.
Mhm.
How do we then turn that over? I mean, this is a core part of your
Right.
day job outside of flipping houses and podcasts and
Yep.
barroom dancing.
Yeah. So it's putting it into the plan and then putting the actions around it.
Yeah.
It's like we have the dollar amount then. We have a good sense of what retirement is going to look like after we've gone through the values, after we've thought about sort of the phases of retirement. And maybe I will just stop here and pause for a second and focus on that because you have the anticipatory part of
Mhm.
retirement. And then you have the next part, which is the honeymoon phase, where it's fantastic. And then you have I guess what I would call like the disenchantment phase where you might have a sense of loss and lack and then a
Yeah.
reorientation to find a new equilibrium and a new life. And then you find the stability in that. So there's these phases of retirement that we think about, and there's a portion of that where you're gonna be spending the money on the things that you want and can physically do. So we break up the phases of retirement as well. But we get the number, we put the plan in place, and then we start to actually go through the exercise of the dollars and cents, because you can't have the vision without the plan, and you can't have a full plan without the vision. And so it's also staying consistently in communication with clients during that time
Yeah.
period, because it becomes emotional and people might want to change things, which is good because the plan is meant to be flexible, but it is also continuing to have the conversation around building the savings and then talking about the spending in retirement. Because as you talked about, like, savings is a skill, it's something that we learn very early on. Who teaches us to spend skillfully? Like, it's not a lot of people have a hard time doing that in retirement
Yeah.
because you've saved for so long, and it might not feel good to spend on some of that portfolio. So once we put the vision in place, we've got the plan in place, we have the numbers down. We just continually talk about how we're going to get to the next step and how we're actually going to implement it. And then during the time where people are actually transitioning from the working life to the retired life, I think is a really important conversation, and to stay connected with them consistently. I said that a lot here, but I think it's really important because it is very difficult for people to do this on their own.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons it's so hard to do it on your own, you hit on this, is spending in retirement when we kind of have all of these unknowns and a finite amount of savings feels like loss for many
Mhm.
Americans. So taking money out of their 401k or IRA or their savings account at that point to meet their income needs feels like a loss because they've been told for 30 years, and our experience was just keep saving, see it go up to
Right.
the right. That's good. So to actually see it come down to meet our daily and monthly and yearly needs feels like a loss. And so what you see in the macro US spending data is actually people underspend in retirement because they're selfish, they're kind of self-insuring against this risk of running out of money because they don't know how much they need. Most Americans have not done a retirement income projection of how much money they can generate and what they're going to need. So you get very fearful because any spending, we can't fix it. We can't go back. We're not going to go back to work at 82. And so it feels like we only have one shot at this. So getting a good detailed income plan. How are we going to generate income? From where? And what are the tweaks that we can make from spending from one account first or doing Roth conversions, which we've talked about on
Mhm.
the show before? There's a lot of tax planning that comes into this. When do we claim Social Security? Which Medicare are we on? How are we spending money, and at what time can all really matter? And so putting all that together creates a lot more satisfaction around
Mhm.
retirement. So if you look at data that shows that people with written retirement income plans in place are more satisfied with retirement than those that are not, because they've been given permission to spend.
Mhm.
They're not given permission to spend more. It's the same amount of spending.
Right.
It's just they've given themselves that emotional and mental permission to spend because they know that that money will make it throughout retirement. And that is such an important thing because I've done this on the show before too, which is if you asked everyone, I could give you two retirement plans. One is, right, you end up with
Mhm.
the most amount of money you could ever imagine at the end of life when you die, but you had the most miserable retirement ever. Or I could tell you you run out of money on the last day of retirement, but you were the happiest person alive. Which one do you pick? Nobody has yet told me
Right.
they want to die miserably with a lot of money. I'm sure there's somebody that's what
Yeah.
they would pick, maybe for generational wealth or
Mhm.
something else. But everybody usually tells me, "Oh, I'd rather have been happy."
Sure.
And so that tells you something. It wasn't about money or accumulation. It was about enjoyment and life satisfaction. So we need to make sure that we're not losing sight of that for the most optimal retirement plan possible or the most savings,
Yeah.
that we are living life and enjoying things and feeling satisfied. I like that word satisfaction more, maybe more than happiness. I think happiness is hard to gauge,
Mhm.
but satisfaction, you're satisfied with your retirement and feel, that it's going in the right way and you're not losing sleep over it. The last topic I kind of want to wrap up here with is this idea of flexibility in retirement, because there's a lot of different ways to structure your retirement income. There's things that we talk about from flooring strategies, which is like buying a lot of annuities and
Right.
bonds and not taking much market risk. There's others that's more the 4% one we talked about before, in the academic world, we call a systematic withdrawal strategy. So there's some parameters, and then we're taking systematic, right, predictable distributions. There's also bucketing, which we've mentioned in, which is like a time segmentation, meaning we have different assets for different periods of time. All of them can work, but it really has to come back to your own plan. What do you want to do? But I think building flexibility is key. A thread through our whole conversation is today has been that things are going to change. Like
Right.
retirement is not stagnant. It's a 30 to 40-year time
Right.
period. Think about 40 years ago. Was life the same for you?
Absolutely. And 10 years ago,
Yeah.
you don't even have to wait 40 years. And it can be as long as you were actually working.
hmm And so having flexibility in your plan to me is so crucial. Most retirement shortfalls from a saving perspective can be fixed in one of two ways: working about 18 months to 2 years longer. That is the
Mhm.
biggest statistical way to shore up your plan. The second one is the ability to cut back on spending. You are not going to be able to change how much market return occurs out
Right.
there, but you can change how and when you spend money. That is the biggest control factor you have. So, building flexibility, understanding if the markets are performing poorly or if some emergency occurs, that there's areas you can pull back, and getting comfortable with the notion that you can be adaptable and make changes
Mhm.
really helps make retirement, right, savings more sustainable.
100%, Jamie. I think that is a great piece of advice for our listeners today. So, what is one thing you would tell our listeners they could do tomorrow if they're thinking about this conversation?
Yeah, if you're thinking about this conversation, the very first thing to do is to do a retirement income projection, right? Is figure out how much money you actually can generate in retirement, because that sets all of this up. If you don't do that, right, you just can't really move forward. You have to know how much money you're going to
Mhm.
have eventually in retirement. And then you can start making those decisions about your vision in your life and how to put it all together. What can you actually fund? Which things you have to push off. But that's like a very tangible thing. If you were listening today, you could also write down your values and draw them out and send me a picture of your family crest now. So I love seeing those. People do send them to me sometimes. I do this on webinars and
Yeah.
other shows, and they'll email me a photo of it. I love to see them.
Well, I'm gonna have to do that now.
Yeah, we'll
But
have
please don't
to.
judge me on my artwork.
Yeah, maybe if you do it ahead of time, they can put it in the show
Yeah.
notes somewhere, and Kate's drawing of her family crest.
Now
I'm
there's
super
the
excited.
pressure.
Now there's a lot of pressure on us. So everyone, please critique it, leave a review about Kate's hand drawings. It's
Oh,
very
that's
important.
funny. All right, I have homework.
Yeah.
I have homework. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. I think we hit on a lot of good points. Hopefully, our listeners got some value out of it and they're thinking about retirement a little bit differently and not just focusing on the numbers.
Yep. Yeah, don't focus just on the numbers, but it's okay if you have that savings number. And
Mhm.
but yeah, make sure you subscribe to the show also, and drop us a line at some point if you want any help on this or want to meet with somebody. And yeah, make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast channel so you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Planning Perspectives podcast. Don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes are available. Visit our website at www.bmt.com or call us at 833-973-7633. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Investments, not a deposit, not FDIC insured, not insured by any federal government agency, not guaranteed by the bank, may go down in value.